Ms. Johnson, you in your remarks were pretty clear about the small refinery exemption. Obviously, I mentioned that in my opening remarks of my concern. And you're probably aware of the case that I brought forward of Ergon in West Virginia, who has two favorable court decisions from the Fourth Circuit. Shouldn't EPA take into consideration that our courts have actually taken into consideration making regulatory decisions, and that this was causing hardship to this small refinery? How would you respond to EPA's blanket denial of everything when the courts have actually come forward and said it's not a sound decision?
Yes, Senator Capito, you're exactly right. So for the 2016 to 2018 compliance years, the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals vacated and remanded EPA's decision to deny hardship relief to Ergon, West Virginia. Ergon runs about 23,000 barrels per day. It is truly one of the smallest refineries in the country. And the court summarily rejected EPA's decision because the EPA did not consider the facts of Ergon's specific case, its location, how it distributes its fuels, the fact that 70% of its then production was diesel, and it remanded to EPA. EPA then took another shot at Ergon and again denied Ergon's petition, even though it had been vacated and remanded by the court, and again determined that Ergon was ineligible. The second time, the Fourth Circuit vacated EPA's decision again, this time finding that EPA had been arbitrary and capricious in treating Ergon differently than any other small refinery. So now this is the third attempt to prevent Ergon, West Virginia, from receiving hardship relief. Essentially, what EPA is proposing to do is Ergon and every other small refinery in the United States will be denied hardship relief if EPA proceeds on this path. Ironically, on the basis that every refinery in the United States, from the largest multinational oil company to the tiniest small refinery in Newell, West Virginia, has exactly the same cost of compliance. That it doesn't matter that a large integrated oil company can export. It doesn't matter that a large integrated oil company has excess RINs and makes millions in speculation. Everybody's cost is the same. And so I always go back to the DOE study prepared for Congress, which explains the hardship that small refineries will suffer as a result of their inability to blend, as a result of their inability to take massive amounts of capital and joint venture.
Thank you.
So, yes, you're correct, Senator, that this is the third attempt to divest Ergon of relief.
And we specifically in the law made provisions for a small refinery exemption, correct?
Specifically made provisions for each petition to be decided on its merits. That's correct.
Thank you. Mr. Polaresi, your last chart, I was looking through your charts because we have them in our book, talks to me about where we see gas prices going and who really gets hurt the most. And this talks about the rising cost of transportation fuels harm low-income and many minority communities. We know if you have to pay an extra $10 to $15 to fill your car up, that hits that person that at the end of the month is looking for an extra $10 or $15 to help pay their electric bill or some other bill that's also rising at the same time. You talked about the cost of blending as about 28.5% or 28 to 30 cents per gallon, so there's a cost there. And then you also mentioned to me earlier before we got started that you think as we're moving forward, there's some guardrails that EPA needs to have as we're moving forward that we could provide for them. If you want to talk about that issue, I'd like to hear that, but I'd also like to hear your opinion on the overall cost of what we see now, high cost of gasoline, and how we can deal with this issue of who's hitting it the hardest and how we can move. There's proposals out here to get rid of the gas tax, but that's 18 cents. It's not even close to this.
Right. So first let's talk a little bit about the sort of government-mandated energy transition, because we are the largest oil and gas producer in the world. And we are very concerned that certain policies are now seeking to constrain the North American production platform before the alternatives are ready. We're going to have, we're going to produce a lot of EVs, we're going to produce a lot of alternative fuels and technologies. But if we proceed with, between 2010 and 2020, the United States alone, and plus the application of biofuels, provided over 80% of world increase in demand for liquid fuels. So that's the first thing we need to think about. We should treat this North American production platform as a strategic and economic asset. We should be very careful before we decide to disrupt it. So that's the biggest incentive, the biggest program we have to keep gas prices under control. The next thing is that we're fighting over a small volume here. Because in the absence of the mandate, we would still be blending anywhere from 8 to 10%. Ethanol is a valuable feedstock. It helps to meet octane requirements and other biofuels. But if we proceed with a mandate, we kind of prohibit innovation and alternatives to come forward because we have no idea what the fuels of the future really are going to look like. And then your final point, this is devastating for low-income communities, as you can see from that chart. And everyone who wants to proceed with these exotic fuels of the future should keep in mind that I don't believe the American people will react very positively if we go into a period of sustained high gasoline prices.
Thank you. Thank you.
All done? Okay.